The chair lays out House Bill 4625 and recognizes Chairwoman Thompson to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. House Bill 4625 is designed to strengthen Texas laws relating to prevention and response to racial and other forms of identity-based bullying by establishing the following provisions. The bill defines identity-based bullying and makes it clear that bullying on the basis of a student's protected status is prohibited. While this may seem like common sense, this provision is necessary because teachers have reported feeling unequipped and afraid to effectively address identity-based bullying and harassment due to misinformation about Texas education laws pertaining to prohibited concepts that can be taught and discussed in schools. The bill requires employees who witness or learn about an incident of bullying to report it to the appropriate school officials, aligning with recent guidance issued by TEA. The bill requires schools to offer a range of supportive measures to ensure student safety and provide recommendations for students to be successful in the classroom after experiencing a bullying incident. This builds on current law, which requires schools to offer counseling to impacted students. Many students are understandably derailed academically after being the victim of bullying, and it's important for schools to work with students and families to support students. The bill established clear guidelines for documenting, investigating, and resolving reports of bullying, addressing a significant gap in current law. While current bullying laws and TA guidance requires schools to establish a policy to address bullying, schools' practice in this regard varies dramatically across the state. The bill seeks to ensure fairness and transparency for all impacted participants and accountability for schools by requiring written documentation of bullying reports and investigation findings so that all students and families are involved in the resolution of a bullying issue. The bill makes clear that bullying prevention policies and instructional standards address identity-based bullying as part of the educational and positive school culture building efforts. Finally, the bill requires schools to collect and report data regarding the prevalence of identity-based bullying to better understand the frequency of these incidents ongoing. Today, we're going to hear disturbing stories from families about the horrific things their children have experienced in our schools. These families have been fighting for basic human dignity and respect for their children, and unfortunately, their schools have failed to protect and support their children. And because their schools have failed them, these children are often forced to defend themselves from verbal and cyberbullying and physical assault. In many of these cases, students defending themselves have ended up in the DAEP, while the students who engage in the harmful behavior are not held accountable. Worse still, these students have experienced severe mental health crises that derail them academically and emotionally. Their stories are just a handful of the hundreds of students and parents fighting to deal with this unacceptable behavior. Madam Chairperson, I reserve the right to close, and I'm available to answer questions if there are any.
Members, are there any questions? The chair calls up Sharday Magaya, Phyllis Gambles, and Tracy Kemp. We show you as, did I say it right, Sharday McGahay, and you're representing yourself, and you're for the bill.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
I gotta read mine. I'm not savvy like nobody else. Okay. So my name is Sharday McGahay. I'm from Lubbock, Texas. My kids attend Lower Bush Middle School. My kids have experienced racism on many different levels to the point that it has affected their mental and physical health. Some things that they have endured are being turned upside down in the hallway and called monkey while the principal names it as horseplay. Playing whipping sounds from their phones in my children's ears and other students that also attend their school. Pulling up to our residence, throwing glass objects and making monkey noises over our fence. Telling my daughter that they have been given a pass to use the N-word with a hard ER. When this is brought to administration, they have been informed that saying the N-word is just another word and it doesn't hurt people, or stating that that type of language was used as a mistake. When my daughter asked the superintendent what was the definition of zero tolerance, he didn't have an answer for that. This all began the school year of April 2021 and have yet to be taken seriously. It has now trickled down to the elementary schools. For an example, a little boy told my 10-year-old daughter that she looks like a black autistic monkey. This occurred just last Friday. I have filed an OCR complaint that was investigated, and all that has come from that was me given the opportunity to transfer my kids to another school. This is a crisis. This is a pandemic. I come here before you guys today begging that you guys hear our cries and for myself and other parents, and consider passing this bill into effect, and let's come together to make a change now and for the future of our kids. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? I'm sorry about what happened to your kids.
Thank you.
Phyllis Gambles, we show you is the Lubbock chapter of the NAACP, legal redress and self, and for the bill.
I am Phyllis Gambles, Lubbock chapter NAACP, legal redress. This is very emotional for me because I take every call for every parent. Her children are in Lubbock Cooper, but I sit before you today to say that we have a pandemic in Lubbock, Texas, throughout Texas, but definitely Lubbock, Texas. If you caught the name of that school, that's Laura Bush Middle School, former First Lady. Lubbock Cooper ISD, Lubbock Friendship ISD, Lubbock ISD. I'm a graduate of Lubbock ISD. Sudan ISD, Slayton ISD. Bullying is out of control. I talk to parents with fourth graders who consider suicide. I talk to parents with children who cry because they don't want to go to school. The common factor and the importance of this bill is that when we go before the school boards, and we've been before many, they have no idea what to do. And the school boards that might have an idea could absolutely care less. We need this bill because there needs to be a firm definition of what happens when a child is called a monkey, when a child is turned upside down, when a child is followed in a school hall with an app that makes a whipping sound indicative of slavery. We need guidelines for that. The common factor is they have no idea. I stood before a school board as just assistants to a 15-year-old who asked, what is zero tolerance in this school district? Not only did they not answer her, they went on to say they didn't have to answer her. We have no ramification for the bullies. But when a victim has had enough and they retaliate, we immediately have the process for them. I have 14-year-olds that have been arrested. I have children that have gone from straight A students, could have definitely been the valedictorian. Instead, tried to commit suicide, ended up in a mental hospital, and is alienated from her family. We have a pandemic in Lubbock, Texas, of racism that has been documented for almost 2 years with no resolution. I beg you to pass this bill.
Members, any questions? Oh, Chairman Dutton.
Thank you. Let me ask you, who's your state representative?
My state representative is Charles Perry,
That's the senator.
Senator.
Yes.
What's the other Burrows? Burrows.
Have you spoken to him at all
We did.
about this? You have?
We did this morning. This morning in his
this
defense.
morning, not
I only
before.
spoke to him this morning.
Okay. And has he indicated that he'd be willing to help you?
Absolutely, he did.
Okay. Because he would be the first person I would tend to want to talk to. And so what does the school board member that represents you say?
In the Cooper School Board situation, which these parents, children stood before, it is a absolute dismissed. I've never been so insulted as a black professional woman as I was standing before that school board. Because again, we're talking about a year ago, and these issues were made very clear. The children stood before the school board. To me, it's a little bit different because we get emotional if you're dealing with the parents. But when you have children standing and saying, I told my principal it was not horseplay to be turned upside down and hung like this, right? And then to be called a monkey. And we didn't even get a response from that school board until we went to NBC News with this story.
Well, it sounds to me like what you all are experiencing is outside the parameters of what this bill does. And I'm not trying to make light of it, but I'm trying to tell you that we've got a problem then in Lubbock that exists, that no amount of legislation that we pass here is going to help it. I think what we've got to do is figure out how to get at the issue of what's causing the district to respond in the way it is, and the teachers, I assume, who are responding in the same vein. You're not getting any relief from the teachers, are you?
No,
The principal?
no,
The school superintendent?
no,
The school board?
no.
That's a problem, because that's where you're supposed to go if you have a problem. And that's who ought to be addressing whatever problem you have. As a member of the Public Education Committee, I can tell you that the members of that committee, I will talk to the chairman about what you all have said here today. And I get my staff to get my card to you so that whatever help I can be,
Yes,
if you'll call me, I'll come to Lubbock.
please.
And I would like to see if the extent of the problem and to what extent that the whole Committee on Public Education can help you.
Yes,
Because I think that therein lies the problem that you're facing, because even with this bill passed, the problems that you're facing are still going to be there. And we need to do something to address it.
I absolutely agree with you. Our issue is in that particular city, they don't expect anyone to take a stand. They don't expect this. So the bill is a step.
Right.
And we welcome you.
What percentage of the student body is students of color?
2%? 2%.
2%, only 2%. Okay, well, I'd like to talk to you after
Yes,
this, and
thank
I
you.
don't take up the time, Mr. Chairman, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair.
Thank you, and Chairman Dutton asked a lot of the questions that I was going to ask, but follow up on what he said. How many districts did you say there were in Lubbock? You named off about 4, didn't you?
I named off 5.
5.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so is the African-American population dispersed throughout those 5 districts? Or is it mostly concentrated in 1 or 2 or 3 of them?
No, it's throughout the city.
And so Yeah, and it's going to be a couple of percentage, 2 or 3% in each one of those districts?
Yes, sir. Lubbock ISD will have more African-American students.
And those school district boundaries have been in place, I suppose, for many, many, many years. Those don't ever change with redistricting or anything.
Well, Lubbock
Those are many-
Cooper and Lubbock Friendship are fairly new.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, members? Okay. Tracy Kemp, we show you representing yourself and you're for the bill.
Hi, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Tracy Kemp, and I say before you as a parent. I am not an expert on bills. I don't know a lot about how this political system works, but I'm sitting here before you because I moved to Lubbock, Texas 2 years ago from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And my experience in Texas, it's been horrific. My son, Braden, was in eighth grade last year when 2 months into the school year, he was called a nigger. And all of these racial things that Sharday talked about, I went to the school. All of these things were documented. All of these, I drive an hour from work every day. Anytime there was an incident, I would leave work to make sure that my child was okay. We've been in front of the board. We've been in front of, I've had to make a call to the FBI hotline because that's how bad it had gotten in our school district. And until NBC did a nightly news story is when the school district actually recognized that there was racial bullying that occurred. That was almost 10 months later. And I sit before you because this bill might not protect my child now, and it might not protect his brother that's in 6th grade or his sister that's in 5th grade that does not want to go to that school. That's our district. We didn't bust into there. We live in that district. Our tax dollars go to fund that school. And my child doesn't want to go there in fear that she will be talked about, discriminated against, bullied, harassed. There was a page created called Monkeys of Laura Bush Middle School. It was an Instagram page, and the tagline said, "Send pictures of monkeys," and my child is the first picture on there. And I just want you guys to understand, as a 14, 15-year-old boy in a new school, in a new city, and that's how these people perceive him. The mental health, we know that school shootings and teen suicide is because of bullying. And as a parent, what am I supposed to do? I've done everything except for, excuse me guys, beat their parents up. I've gone to the police. I've gone to the school board. I've gone to my principal, vice principal. I've been to Washington, D.C. to talk about this because it is that bad. And if I could be here before you and this bill could maybe help guide some teachers, help guide some administrators or principals or school districts so that they can save other children. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? I'm sorry about what happened to your child.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
The chair calls Mary Piggies, Paige Duggins Clay, Trinity Hawkins. Mary Piggies. You're representing yourself and you're for the bill.
I am for the bill, and I am representing myself and my daughter here. We have went through things that's similar. My name is Mary Piggies. We have went through things that's similar to what Sharday and them was saying earlier. I used to serve on the school board there in Slayton, Texas, and for 2 years we've been going through this, through the board, through the school, through the things. She's in counseling, mental counseling right now, and it's to the point to where she don't even want to go. She, like she said, this is emotional because we done been everywhere. We don't know what else to do, nowhere else to go, but something must be done. And I want Trinity to tell her story. Is that your name?
1 minute.
Yeah, I did, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry.
King.
If I may, I meant to ask this one earlier there. Several of the witnesses have commented on 2 years. Now, that could just be the amount of time that that particular child was in that particular school. But is this something that's really been noticeable in one of those school districts in the last 2 years, but 10 years ago it wasn't an issue? That's what I'm getting at. Do you have any kind of frame of reference for that?
You know,
Well, you can't answer it. I mean, we can bring you up here in a minute as follow.
10 years ago, my son,
That's
my
just the rules here. I'm not trying to be rude.
my
I
baby
apologize.
is 41 years old, and when they went through the system, it wasn't there. That kind of racism was not there. I know when I went to school, it wasn't there, and I'm 65. But it's just something here in the last 2 to 3 years that magnified it. People feel emboldened to feel like they can say what they want to say and do what they want to do, and it is nothing can be done about it.
Is it on all the campuses and all the districts, or just a handful of them?
Well, from the parents and things that I talk to, the phone calls that I get, it seems like it's like they says the pandemic just spreading, and that's what we get.
Chairman Dutton.
Thank you. Did you say you are on the school board or were on the school board? Were? Okay. And how long have you been off the school board?
About 20 years or more.
And you were elected, I assume?
I was.
Okay. And you just quit, or you got unelected, or what happened?
Well, at that time, my children had graduated. And so I was just moving over for the next parent that want to step in and be active. So I just left this.
Okay. And were you able to do, sort of address some of these problems when you were on the school board?
We didn't have these problems at that time.
You didn't have it? And so when did it start to sort of raise its ugly head? I think you answered.
Yeah,
Chairman.
about 2-3 years ago, I had wrote a letter to the superintendent when she was in 8th grade, and she was dealing with all the racism and name calling, and the teachers choose not to hear it, and when she respond back, they hear what she says, but they don't never hear the other side. So I addressed the superintendent. I went to the board meeting, and I also addressed the board meeting about it. I talked to the principal, and I talked to each individual teacher. Nothing is done. No feedback.
What do they tell you? Were they even listening to you, or do they have anything to say that we're going to investigate it, we're going to do something about it, or we're going to what?
We'll get back to you, and I'm still waiting today. So it's the next board. So I'm there at every board meeting. I'm there at every chance I can get, and I talk to them all. It's every month. So, but they are getting back to me, and I'm still waiting.
And so your daughter is in what grade?
She's a sophomore this year.
Sophomore, okay. And you've had other children go through the same school district?
I had 2 boys.
Okay.
They
Now
went
they
through-
graduated,
They graduated.
but they didn't face this kind of problem.
No, they didn't.
Do you have an idea of what's causing this?
I kind of do, and I would hate to say it because I don't want to.
Well, the truth
I'm
is the truth,
just
though.
being honest.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and say it. I feel like when Donald Trump became president of the United States, he said a lot of things that people wanted to say, and they couldn't speak it. So I feel like that's where it's growing from, because even what made me come to that was because even in the school, when you go to school, the kids start wearing the MAGA hats, and they'll be wearing all these things. But then when you put on something that says anything else, Malcolm X or Black History or something,
Or Black Lives Matter.
all that, you can't wear it. You cannot wear that. You have to turn it inside out. But when you wear something to say MAGA, Trump, it starts from the office all the way down the hallway. But our children can't wear the positive things with in the school. So that's where I believe it's trickled down from.
So would it be fair to say that your sons who graduated didn't experience it because it wasn't spoken, but it may have been hidden?
I agree with that.
Okay. And you said you were from Slayton?
I'm from Slayton.
I'm not too familiar with
It's
Slayton.
about 15 miles from Lubbock.
15 miles from Lubbock. Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Paige Duggins Clay. Oh, yes. Trinity Hawkins. Shows you're representing yourself and you're for the bill.
Yes, I am.
Go
My
ahead.
name is Trinity Hawkins. I'm a student at Slayton High School, and I feel like this bill will help a lot, just not with myself, but with like other kids, like other generations coming up. So like it's be settled more, because I'm not a monkey. I have a name, and you shouldn't address me by a monkey. You should address me by my name. It's not even a student. It's not most of the students. The principals and the assistant principals are saying the word too. But when I say something that's not racist, I get sent to ISS. But I can get called porch monkeys. I can get called fake girl with fake hair, smile if your hair is fake, and nothing gets done. But the moment that I say something back, oh, I'm in trouble, or I have to sit in the office a whole class period because I stood up for myself, basically. And I feel like it's not fair that I have to go through this. And I feel like it's not fair for the younger kids that's coming up to have to deal with racism and have to deal with getting called N-words and all kind of things. And when you address it, or when it's a constant thing, it mentally like drains you because you feel like, oh, well, I'm coming here just to get called a monkey or get called out my name. And it hinders you from trying to learn because you're in class writing and they're smile if your hair's fake. Like that, I just don't feel safe at my own school. And that's, our parents sent us to school to be safe. And you can't even go to school without getting called out your name.
Chair Dutton.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Now, you're in 8th grade, you said?
I'm a 10th grader.
10th grader? Okay. And how long have you been sort of experiencing the things that you're going through?
Since I was in 8th grade, so about 2 years.
Okay, and prior to that, you didn't have any...
It's always been in the school, but it has never really been directed towards me. Like the boys would always be like, oh, what up, my N-word and stuff. But it started getting directed towards me when I got to 8th grade.
And when you complained to the teacher, what's been the response that you've gotten?
It's just a word.
It's just what?
It's just a word.
It's just a word. And the teachers actually hear the words in many cases?
Yes, they hear it, but it's one ear out the other. They just dismiss it like they don't hear it. And when I tell that, like, he just called me an N-word, oh, it's just a word. It's nothing that serious. Or let's go out in the hallway and talk about it. It's no, go to the office. It's just they handle it themselves, but they don't.
So it's never been, the complaints you had have never been resolved at all?
Never.
They never even said, the other student never experienced any discipline whatsoever?
No.
And so you go through this. Are you in a class where you're the only black person?
I have a couple classes where I'm the only black kid in there.
And is that generally when these kind of things happen?
Yes, in one of my classes, my teacher, she has me in front of I'm the only black kid in there, and I sit in the front. Everybody else sits behind me. And I've asked her to move me, and it's just, no, you can sit in the front. Like, that's unnormal.
So you're told where to sit, but everybody else gets to choose where they sit?
No, she did that on purpose. Like, she chose everybody's seat, but she just put me in the front of the classroom.
Oh, I see. So she directed for you to sit in the front. And did she ever explain to you why?
No, she's never given me a real reason. She's like, you be better right here. And and I'm the only one in the classroom that sits by myself. Everybody else has people they sit with, but they're behind me, and I'm the only one who has to sit by myself in the front of the classroom.
Oh, so you sit in the front of the classroom, but there's nobody on your right or left?
No, they're all just behind me.
And is that just one class like that, or is that generally all the classes?
Well, in that class, I'm the only one that sits in the front. But the other classes, I'm just in the back of the room, like on the last row in every class where I'm the only black kid in there.
And is that an assigned seating?
Yes.
So they sit you either in the front or the back?
Yeah. It's just not me. It's like when I have another class with another student, we're all in the back, or we're all at a table together. And so it's just like they're trying to, they know what they're doing, because why do you just have us in the front of the classroom by ourselves or in the back of a row?
Do they have teachers of color?
We have one teacher at our school of color.
One teacher?
One teacher.
And do you know what they teach, or?
He's an assistant teacher. Like, he helps with kids with disabilities. He go in classrooms. He's the only one.
And when you complain to the principal, what happens?
It's just a word. And he sits in the office and cusses himself. So it's nothing.
He sits in the office and does what?
He cusses, like, he says bad words and stuff to us.
Oh, does he?
Mm-hmm.
How long's that principal been there? Yeah, how long's the principal been there?
He's been there from my freshman year. He was at the junior high. He was a principal at the assistant principal at the junior high, and he moved over to high school to be a head principal. So he's only been there for a year or two.
Okay, but it's all happened under his watch. It's gotten worse, I think you said.
Because our assistant principal, I have a voice recording of him saying the N-word to me.
The principal?
Assistant principal.
The assistant principal? Saying the N-word to you?
Yes. It was a situation that had went on that got reported, not by me, by another person. And he called me in the office, and something just told me, so I started voice recording. And he just, out of the blue, just said, okay, so who said, and he said the N-word. And I, looked at him, and I was like, what did you, And he just, I was like, what did you just say? And he said it more than once. And he was just, looking me dead in my eyes when he said it.
And you didn't complain about that to the board or anything, did you?
Yes, I did.
You did complain to the board about it? Did they do anything about it?
No, he's still there.
And what's your relationship with that principal now? Or vice principal, I guess he was?
Not trying to be rude, but I hate him. I hate the principal, and I hate the assistant principal. Because they're not doing their job. If they would have did their job when the first time we reported it, this situation would have been dead. It would have never kept going. But they do not know how to do their job.
Well, usually the leadership sort of sets the environment for everybody else. And so if they're not, if they're inclined to engage in that kind of conduct or conversation, then it's going to engender that all throughout the whole of the organization. Okay, well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being brave enough to withstand that. There are people who obviously aren't going to care for you just because of your color. I'd like to think that those are the people who, when the good Lord had the people wandering around the desert for 40 years, I hope that's who they are, because some of them are never going to get to a place where they have the attitude that Dr. King had, that, you ought to be evaluated by the content of your character as opposed to the color of your skin. But I don't know how to tell you to keep fighting that, because I recognize that school is a difficult place in the first place, and to have to go through all of what you're apparently going through is a difficult proposition for anybody, for any of us up here would be. But, it's something that we've got to do something about, and I promise to help you all do something about it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? What was the school district you said you're in again?
Slayton ISD.
Slayton ISD. Thank you for your testimony. You did really, really wonderful. You're very brave.
Thank you.
Paige Duggins Clay with IDRA and also representing yourself, and you're for the bill.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you so much to this committee for taking the time and for being present, as always, to hear the incredible stories and unfortunate stories of impact of these impacted committee members. I'm Paige Duggins Clay, IDRA's Chief Legal Analyst, testifying in support of House Bill 4625. We thank this committee and Chair Reynolds for their leadership bringing forward this critically important legislation. You know, I did prepare testimony that I've provided y'all. One of the attachments to my testimony is actually a copy, and I apologize, it's black and white. I will follow up to provide the color copy so you can see in vivid detail some of the cyberbullying that the families have been experiencing and some of these really horrific images that we're talking about, which you've heard about a little bit and you'll hear more testimony about in just a moment. I'm going to deviate from my script just a little bit and speak from my heart because it's very emotional for me. It's my privilege to have supported many of these families to coming to testify today, and you've heard their cry that this really has been sort of a tribunal of last resort in many ways to get their stories heard. And many of these families are from Lubbock and the Lubbock area. I cannot emphasize enough that as an advocate who works in this space, I get calls at a minimum on a weekly basis from families all across the state dealing with issues of this nature. And it's racial bullying, bullying on the basis of national origin and immigration status, certainly on gender identity and gender more broadly, sexual harassment. It really is a crisis, and we can. It's very hard for kids and families and educators to come testify during the day, so we couldn't bring them all here. But I will tell you that we're hearing from them, and that these kiddos are hurting, and their families are hurting, and seeking solutions. Chair Dutton, I certainly appreciate your questions about sort of what's the purpose behind this bill. And you've heard some of the stories about where this came from. We actually co-wrote a lot of this language alongside these families. And one of the things that Trinity didn't share is that these educators, to the extent that they are trying to do the right thing, they don't have guidance about what exactly to do when a student comes to them or they witness or observe this really harmful behavior. And Trinity actually wrote herself an affidavit to one of her teachers, said, here's what happened to me, and will you sign this so I can turn it into the principal? I mean, asking a young child to do something like that in order to advocate for herself is just unacceptable. I can provide the documentation of that. So I wanted to emphasize that piece. This bill really does create a process for schools to follow. Very common sense. When you get a notification of any kind of bullying, but especially this kind, you document it. You report it to the appropriate authorities, and you notify the parents involved, and you ask them and have them participate in the investigation. That's the most critical part of this legislation, is really bringing the families in and making sure that we're gathering all the available information and evidence. And finally, this bill collects data on this issue. We do, TEA does currently collect data around bullying generally, but not about this issue, particularly bullying on the basis of a student's identity. There's research that talks about the really horrific mental health and other impacts of this sort that is particularly nefarious and problematic and harmful. And it's critically important for us to gather that information so we can tailor our prevention strategies accordingly. I'm happy to answer any questions about the legislation.
Members, any questions? I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The pictures, and some of it's kind of hard to tell. I'll look forward to the pictures, but some of this looks photoshopped. But do you know where they edited and added people's faces to different pictures? Do you know where they were these pictures taken of these children, or were these pictures of these children that they found on social media, or do you know how they got these pictures?
Yes, ma'am. A little bit of both, and one of our families whose children are featured will testify in just a moment about this, but it's a combination. Some of the photos in the Laura Bush Middle School Instagram posts were taken sort of slyly while children were in the bathroom or in the cafeteria, and some were drawn from students' sort of public social media sites. A little bit of both.
I mean, obviously it's horrific, but outside of that, you have pictures of minors taken without their consent and posted on social media without their parents' consent.
Right.
Let alone how awful the posts are. But
right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Any other questions? Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay. Chair calls Tiffany Harrison, LaQuanta Hernandez, and Jasmine Hernandez. Tiffany Harrison, show you representing yourself and you're for the bill.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tiffany Harrison, and while I occupy a lot of roles, I'm currently the vice president of a large suburban school district. But more importantly, before that, I was a classroom teacher for 8.5 years. So a Black classroom teacher in the state of Texas in a district that has 9% Black students, 30% Hispanic students, and a growing, fluctuating population of AAPI students. I'm here to tell you that while we would like to geographically isolate where this is happening across the state of Texas. And there's data to back this up. So I want to talk a little science with you. There is something called the amygdala hijack, to where when we don't feel safe, whether we are children, whether we are adults, our brains release chemicals that put us into flight, fight, freeze, or fawn mode. So as an educator for 8.5 years, I often saw students go into freeze mode, where they would be present in body, but not present in mind, because we had created or fostered or simply been complicit in an environment that was not safe for them. When we have an environment where kids are experiencing racialized or other identity-based bullying, we are complicit in an environment that's not safe for them. And Representative Dutton, I did hear you ask about academic outcomes. This kind of racialized bullying has incredibly negative impacts on academic outcomes. When you go to school, when you're unsafe, when you as a student are having to advocate for yourself beyond reason to be treated justly, fairly, and be protected when you're left alone, that's not an environment where you can learn effectively in. When we are asking parents to go beyond reason, to have to advocate for their children to be treated with dignity and humanity, that's not a conducive learning environment. And as a Black educator, I can tell you, teaching in those environments are not a conducive environment either. And we've kind of created this problem because we've created a socio-political context where we are anti-DEI, loosely defined anti-CRT. So a lot of the interventions that would happen to support students of color or students that are marginalized in any way by any identity facing bullying, educators are often afraid to access, because where is the line? Is that considered DEI? Is that considered CRT? And so we've really hamstrung the intervention here, which is why I am in support of this bill, and I'm asking you to pass it, because it lays out a very clear pathway of what should happen at every turn. Now, this is important not only for the students that are doing the bullying, it's incredibly important because we need to work with those students to help them understand the harm that's done by words. You have heard and you will continue to hear, and it's been my experience, students that otherwise were fine experiencing this kind of bullying, experiencing suicidal ideation, becoming removed and withdrawn from society, having to access mental health intervention, where otherwise, prior to this kind of bullying, they were fine. And so it's vital that we lay a pathway out, that we collect data, so we don't have to say, oh, is this just localized at this one school district or this one school? So we can successfully know where this is happening and it can be addressed from beginning to end. So that it's not left up to every educator or every principal to decide how to address this kind of bullying and this kind of harm. Students that do the harm need to know, and students that are harmed need to know that someone has their back. It's very important. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you. LaQuanta Hernandez?
Yes.
And you're representing yourself and you're for the bill.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just want to start off with sharing that I am an educator. I've been an educator for 20 years. I was a classroom teacher for 11 years, and I have been a central office administrator for 9 years. Okay. I'm here today as a parent advocating for my daughter, advocating for children, really seeking some change, some meaningful change. We do live in the Rio Grande Valley. It's this is not, I know the other ladies were talking about Lubbock. We live in the Rio Grande Valley. My husband is a supervisor for the United States Border Patrol. My children were born on the border. We've always had to, live in a border town. The majority of the students in her school district are Hispanic. I am the only African-American administrator in the entire region, not just district, but region. There is one teacher at the high school that is African American, and that is it. So within her school, her situation was back in 2021 when she was an 8th grader. She is now a 9th grader. I believe from what I saw, I believe she was the only biracial student there. There may have been another, okay, maybe 2. And so her situation started, hers was through racial harassment through online through Instagram. I believe it started out with TikTok. With her experience was a picture of her face, her standing with her volleyball team. They had cropped her face out, and they had captioned it, the only black BITCH in school. At that point, we have a very close family. She immediately told me. I reported it to her principal at her school. And again, I'm in administration. I didn't know that there's certain, different parameters or things that's supposed to be done. And that's why I am for this bill. I thought long and hard about it, because what's in place now is each district can kind of do how they want to do it. There has to be something, a clear guideline. Because when we reported to the principal, he said, I'll look into it. We did report it to TikTok. They took it down maybe about 2 days later. And as you know, anything you put out in cyber media world is out there. It was taken down. The principal never got back with me. I don't know how it was addressed. And my daughter will talk to you about that later. But fast forward 2 months later, now we have it on Instagram. And now we have an Instagram that is titled the name of her junior high, and it says niggers. And now we have pictures of her. So earlier you were talking about pictures of her face, pictures of her face superimposed on Emmett Till's body being hung. Okay. Pictures of her face superimposed on someone in a coffin with the KKK behind her. Pictures of her face on a cross burning with the KKK behind her. Pictures of her in a cotton field picking cotton. Just derogatory comments, filthy monkey burning. Why do y'all have to be black, man? Y'all are so filthy. These are the things that she's gone through at her school, which is predominantly Hispanic. Okay. She did ask the bullies to take that account down, to delete it. And in response, it was STFU. Just because you're the only black BITCH in school, don't make you special. So again, that Instagram account had likes, followers, hearts, been shared, all those different things. I brought that to the attention because I believe in chain of command. So I had told the principal the first time, nothing happened. So then it went into, I'm letting the superintendent know, I'm letting my bosses know, this is in my school district where I work.
Chairman Lozano.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall. And those students, the bullies, are they still in school? Did they get any suspension?
What happened, because I didn't know, as a parent, I'm lost. I don't know what I need to do. So I would start looking through school board policy. Basically, I was told that, she could go to a different school if she wanted to. I went before the board, and only one board member stood up and says, why should she have to go to a different school? They need to go. Mm-hmm. But that was just one school board member that stood up in her defense. Long story short, it came out to 3 boys from her school that were doing it that she does not know. We did end up going to court, and the 2 boys that were supplying the pictures to the poster, so the only person that really, got in trouble was the poster. He was asked, why did you do it? And he said, because I thought it would be funny. So my concern is, if it had been handled correctly the first time, back in September, because there should be clear guidelines. That's why I am for the bill, and I thought long and hard. We can't have different school districts doing different things. Mm-hmm. And so then the second time, I go before the board. I had already spoken to the superintendent. When I went before the board, they had no idea. So apparently the communication is not there too. So we can't just leave it up to the districts, because my daughter had to go to counseling. When this happened, she didn't sleep in her bed for 4 days. She's a 13-year-old girl, not wanting to sleep in her bed, not wanting to leave out of the house. We have the FBI contact us. Do you want us to sit outside of your house? My husband's law enforcement, and we have cameras, so he's like, no. But to think that she had to go through that, and she had a licensed school professional tell her, told us after meeting with her a couple of times, if she did not have the faith that she has, because she has a lot of faith, if she did not have the faith that she has and the family unit that she has, she would have committed suicide. I have a problem with this. I've gone to Washington twice because of this.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Chair Dutton.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking at the bill, and I may have missed something, but if, and the problem I think you and the others have faced, or the problems of people who are morally bankrupt, I call it. And so I looked in the bill to find out how do we eliminate them, and there's nothing in the bill that says that.
To eliminate, I'm sorry. Go.
Something that helps you get at the problem that you all are all facing. I'm trying to figure out in the bill, where is that?
It's okay?
Sure.
I feel like if there's some clear guidelines on what, as a mother, as a child, you reported it. What is the school doing to look into it? Okay, there has to be, initially the principal, when it all said and done, well, I just thought it was an isolated incident. I'm an educator, and to me, I have an obligation to any student that ever came to me and did a cry out, is what I call it. I'm not going to just assume it's an isolated incident. I'm going to do an investigation. I'm going to look into it. But to give different districts to say, however you want to choose to do it, that's a problem. There has to be some specific parameters there.
Well, the problem I have with that is that even when you put the guidelines in place, that we really have guidelines now, and
we do,
and yet they're being violated. And so even when you put narrow guidelines in place, it seems to me that what you're faced with, or people who are going to violate those guidelines, irrespective of what we do here, unless we do something that gets at, again, the morally bankrupt that exist, because there's still going to be sort of the people who are deciding what the ingredients are and how to get at what you're trying to get at, and I understand it totally.
At the cost of our children, though?
Pardon?
At the cost of our,
Well, that's what they're doing now at the cost of the children, and I'm not sure how to get at, to fix it so that you don't have to come back here next session, for example. And it's sad that you have to go through this in 2023, because there are people who would have suggested that this ended some time ago. But that's not the reality that many of us are facing. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do something in this bill or any other bill that changes the outcome for you all, that absolutely changes it, and we can say that's gonna get at it. Because I do recognize that it's a problem, first of all, and it's a serious problem because it's affecting not only you but the children. And so I'll look forward to working with you all to figure out how we get to the right place.
Yeah.
Because too often, sometimes we, here in the legislature, we're policymakers, and we'll decide an issue, we'll decide that we fixed it, only to find out that the problem we were trying to fix is not the solution we came up with. And so we end up doing absolutely nothing to solve the problem. And many times, we here in the legislature have to decide a one-size-fits-all, and it ends up fitting nobody. So to the extent that your problems are different than for another area, for example, we need to be aware of that so that we can at least fashion a remedy that helps to take all of those problems away. And I'm not sure how we get at the hearts of people, but that's where we got to get. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair Thompson?
What's the name of the school that your child was having problems?
she was at Mission Junior High.
Mission Junior High?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Let's Jasmine Hernandez, representing yourself, and we show you're for the bill.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, basically my story is what my mom just said. And after the first incident happened through TikTok, right? The only, investigation or any, questions that were asked to me from any admin, in this case it was my principal, I was walking to class and he stopped me in front of the door. And he just asked if I had any idea, who did it, or, if I heard, just anyone tell me anything that could have helped him find out who it was. And I told him a name because people were telling me that's who did it and, giving me, reasons as to why. And his response was, oh, I don't think she would do something like that. And next thing you know, 2 months later, the Instagram stuff happens. So I feel like had he actually done something the first time, it wouldn't have happened again. And then the second time I missed 3 weeks of school because of it. I was too scared to go to school. I couldn't sleep in my own bed. Whenever I did go back to school, later on I found out that one of the guys who did it ended up leaving from alternative and came back to the same campus. So now I'm worrying about, what if I see him? And even now I still go, now that I'm in high school, he still goes to the same school as me. But I just don't think that I should be leaving where I'm, supposed to be learning because of other people doing stuff to me. So had the principal done what, if there was something set in place that he could follow, then I don't think it would have happened again. So yeah, that's all I want to say.
Are there any questions, members? You're very brave, and you did really great testifying. Thank you for sharing your story, and I'm really sorry that all that happened to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. The chair calls Sarah Frond, Nelson Linder, Maureen Molick. Are you Sarah?
Fruend.
Oh, Fruend, okay. Sarah Fruend, representing yourself, and you're for the bill. You can go ahead.
Okay. My name is Sarah Fruin, and I've been an educator in Austin, Texas for 25 years. After listening to prior testimony, questions, and comments, I want to start by making clear that this is not a problem of individuals. It's not just a problem in Lubbock or Slayton or the Rio Grande Valley school districts, and it's not a recent thing. Racialized and other identity-based bullying happens in every school district across Texas. That's why we're here today. And it's been happening for generations and will continue if we don't take a stand to do something about it. This bill is a necessary first step. I'm here testifying in support of House Bill 4625, which would strengthen protections for students who experience identity-based bullying and harassment. It would also give teachers and school leaders the protocols and practices to effectively address harm that is caused by identity-based bullying with those harmed and with the students who are responsible for the harm. I believe it would also support proactive steps that school districts can take to prevent identity-based bullying from happening in the first place. So kind of to Representative Dutton, to your point, it would also help us to prevent that from happening. Racism, sexism, homophobia, these are the problems that we're talking about here. And there's no easy solution, and there's nothing immediate, but this is a first step. Identity-based bullying can look and sound a lot of ways, and many personal experiences have been shared here today. So I want to share just one experience that always reminds me of the importance of speaking up and showing our students that we take bullying, especially bullying based on aspects of a student's identity very seriously. Several years ago when I taught fourth grade, I'm an elementary teacher. I now coach teachers. But several years ago when I taught fourth grade, one of my black students shared with me an incident that happened the day before on the playground in which another student got angry during a football game and called him a racial slur. I told him how sorry I was that happened and how wrong the other student was to say that. Then we co-created a plan of what should happen next, which involved talking to the student, his teachers, parents, principal, etc. We created that plan because it didn't exist. After we talked to the other student at recess that day, he and I, the student in my class, processed how the conversation went, and I asked him if anything like that had ever happened before. And this is the part that I'll never forget. He said that it happens multiple times every year and had been happening every year since he started school in kindergarten. It's important for you to know that although this incident happened in 4th grade, I was also his 3rd grade teacher. We looped. But he had never shared those experiences with me when he was in my class the previous year. I think it took him a year of getting to know me and my values, seeing me stand up for students in other situations, and feeling the culture of trust and identity safety we had created in our classroom together before he could actually trust me to do something about how he was harmed. You see, in his short experience in school, he had already been taught by us, by his teachers, by his school, that he wasn't safe and wouldn't be protected by the adults when he was harassed for being Black.
Ma'am, can you wrap it up?
Oh, was that the done?
Yes.
Oh, shoot. I thought that was you have 30 more seconds.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to answer any questions.
Members, are there any questions? Chair Dutton?
Thank you. I wanted to turn back to you, to the first witness. You mentioned, and I sort of heard, you said this is a widespread problem throughout Texas, first of all. Is that?
If you can identify.
Yes.
Yes, Sarah Fruand.
Yeah. And so you said that this was a fairly widespread problem throughout Texas. And you also identified certain things that were the problem. Can you tell me what those were again? You said racism
I
and...
think I named racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia. The list could go on and on. Yeah.
Okay. And when I look at those, when I hear you say those, the first thing it caused me to do is to go to the bill and see where the bill eliminates that. Where is that?
Well, and I think the important thing, thank you for that question. I think that there's room in here for, you had mentioned before, like something along the lines of changing hearts and minds, moral type stuff. And I think that the way that the bill addresses this is in offering some prevention, like having trainings and training teachers, but also there's room within there to do work with students, but also it addresses policies and practices. And one thing that, in my experience, that has done more than trying to change someone's perspective or their heart or their mind is changing the policies and practices. So these things are systemic within our education system. It's not just Texas. It's our country. And so I believe that this would address that by giving next steps that would guide us towards something different than we've been doing.
Well, I appreciate that. I've sort of looked at it and only, generally, I guess I could agree with you. But it seems to me that after listening to all these parents, we need a bill that changes teachers and administrators and do something about them, because that's where the problem seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, and I would offer, I've done a lot of work in Austin ISD around this specifically, and we've developed professional learning around speaking up against any biased language that happens in our schools. And so I think that that's an area in which this bill could be beefed up and added to, because it does require professional learning.
But that seems to be where the problem starts. I mean, if I'm hearing them correctly, the witness was just trying to go to school.
Right.
And that's all she was doing, and the instructor puts her in the middle of the class, at the front of the class by herself, nobody else around her. I mean, come on, how do we address that in a bill? I mean, I'm not sure how to do that, but I recognize that that's what you were getting at by suggesting that what the problem was.
Yeah, and part of that is, you know, we do have our hands held in a lot of ways because of some of the legislation that has come out recently, and teachers are afraid to even talk about race in the classroom. For that teacher who is putting her at the front of the class, that is an opportunity to coach. That's an opportunity to, you know, to really talk about like why and the impact of those decisions. But yeah, I mean, when I work with teachers, I'm hearing that a lot. They don't even know, can I even talk about race and racism in our classroom?
Well, sounds like it's being talked about on the other side.
Meaning, tell me a little more.
Well, I mean, the young lady talked about what students were calling her in class, and the teachers.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
it was being talked about.
So it is being talked about. It's being experienced.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And so, I mean, especially for educators, we need to have the space to be able to have these conversations with our students and talk about the things that they're experiencing. I think what we're seeing is also because even starting at a kindergarten level, we see, you know, students are, for example, like told you need to wash your skin because you're dirty. And it starts with those things and it builds. You know, I've had students who were called blackhead, fudge sickle. Those are monkey. Those are things that escalate when they're not handled immediately. It escalates into things like the N-word and some of the things that our older students have been experiencing. And they don't have the language for that always when they're younger, but it harms all of our students. It harms the students that it's being directed at, the kids who are witnessing it. It harms the students who are the ones doing it. Because a lot of times, especially as an elementary educator, I know that, you know, students at that age are trying things out that they've heard or that they've seen, and they're looking to see what kind of reaction they get. And
But like the people who come here and said, there was an adult
yeah,
who let this go on.
Absolutely.
And how do we stop that? I mean, what do we do about that?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is this bill would say we have to say something and we have to have measures in place. We have to have, you know, I think it provides almost like a roadmap of how to handle this because we have been silent historically in many ways, and we've also been very vocal with our message when it comes to students who have been historically marginalized.
We have student code of conducts. We got almost 900 pages in the public education code. Mm-hmm. We've got federal laws. We've got state laws already existing that say you can't do that. But yet, you say that it's fairly widespread throughout Texas. And what I'm trying to do is figure out, what do we do to stop it?
I mean, and again, I think what we don't have right now is a bill that says we have to say something. You know, as of right now, as an educator, I'm not in the situation I shared earlier. I wasn't required to do anything. I wasn't required to do anything. I wasn't required to call the parents. I wasn't required to talk to the student or his teacher. There was nothing that said I needed to do anything. And too often that's exactly what happens. Nothing happens. And so while this bill might not take it as far as it needs to go to solve the initial problems, because again, like those problems that we're talking about, the root of those are, we're talking about racism, we're talking about sexism, we're talking about homophobia, but it's that first step to say, well, at least we need to acknowledge, we need to apologize to the students when that happens to them. We need to work to repair harm, and we need to hold students accountable in a way that they can learn from this mistake and not continue to repeat or escalate it.
But it seems to me that we're looking more at the victim as opposed to the perpetrators and the people who allow it to continue.
And I think this bill does that. It addresses the students who have done the harm in a way that it currently
because
doesn't.
The teacher has a responsibility for classroom management. Mm-hmm. There are certain things that in the code that provide a teacher. And, you know, so why wouldn't a teacher use those? For example, if a child is engaging in certain offensive behavior to one person in the class? The teacher has the responsibility to do something about it and could, under the code as I read it, have the student removed from the classroom. And yet that doesn't happen.
Well, and I think there's a lot of different ways to handle situations like this. I don't always think removal is appropriate, but I do think there are things in the book that do support teachers in doing what they need to do, except that there's so many other factors involved, including the fact that we have a cultural mismatch between our teachers and our students. And so for myself as a white teacher coming in and working with my black and brown students, I didn't always have appropriate responses. It was something that I had to do a lot of learning over many years. Like I said, 25 years as an educator. And I can look back and know that I didn't always make the right decision. I didn't always support my students in the way that I needed to. And sometimes the harm might have also come from me. I mean, that's a truth in our system as well. But as I've learned and as I've listened to a lot of the people that are in this room through the years and done my own work, I found other ways that I needed to approach community building with my students, restorative, doing repair when harm happens, and creating a classroom that all students feel like they're welcome and included and safe.
Well, thank you for the admission, though, because that's one of the things that's bothered me for a long time, and that is that we've kept statistics on, for example, children being disciplined and where they're going. But one of the things I always thought about was we ought to make sure that we categorize the teachers who are doing this, because I think that means they probably need some help that we're not giving them.
Yeah.
But I don't understand if a student in your classroom is using foul language or using the N-word or calling somebody a monkey or something. I mean, why wouldn't you as a teacher have that child removed from your classroom?
Well, a lot of times it's ignorance. I know that I get that question a lot, mostly from white teachers who aren't sure how to handle that. There's discomfort in that. They don't get support or education around it. And so there's a lot of professional learning that we need.
They don't get support from who? The principal?
From the principal, from the district. There's not. I've done a lot of work, race equity work, in my school district. And that has slowly disappeared, for a variety of reasons, but mostly about fear because of things that that teachers think that they're allowed to do or not allowed to do by school districts who don't want to rock the boat too much or only want to listen to the loudest parents. So I think you bring up a good point, and I wonder if that's something that we might consider adding to this bill is what does professional learning look like for educators so that they can be proactive in preventing this from happening in the first place, but also what happens in that community, not just for an individual teacher, because that too often when something like this happens, it's like the canary in the coal mine, right? It shows a bigger problem. And so what kind of work can that community do together lovingly to support each other and their growth as educators, as families, as students?
But it's all going to begin with the teacher in that classroom.
I think it's both and. I think when we have the policies and procedures and practices in place, and that's what this bill does, it also, that conversation about individual accountability also happens, but this is not an individual problem. It is, it lives in individuals, but it really lives in systems. And if we're not going to address both, then we're going to continue to see the same things that we're seeing.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nelson Linder. Show that you did not testify, but you were for the bill. Manya Blaisdell, Andrew Hairston, Gary Blesdo. Hudson? What did I say?
Madam Chair.
Oh,
Madam Chair, could I just say something real quick?
Chair Dutton.
Thank you. I just pulled up the numbers on Slayton ISD, and 8th grade math the black students are succeeding only at 17%.
How much?
17%.
Or what? It's
8th grade math. Hispanics were at 25%. I mean, reading, 3rd grade, reading is blacks 57% and Hispanics are reading at 55%. Yeah, and that appears to be higher than the state average in reading, but it's certainly lower in math, in 8th grade math. So I just wanted to point that out.
Manya Blaisdell, representing yourself, and you're for the bill.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman Thompson, Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Manya Blaisdell, and I'm testifying in support of this bill on behalf of myself as someone personally impacted by bullying. When I was 15, my 12-year-old sister Rachel committed suicide because she was bullied. We were the only Jewish children in our elementary school and were targeted because of our religious identity on many occasions. In middle school, the bullying intensified, and this is when it became particularly challenging for Rachel. Since Rachel isn't here to tell us exactly what happened, we will never know what her breaking point was. This is frequently the case with bullying victims. Much goes on in secret and is never revealed, making the grieving and healing of those left behind even more difficult. While most people know intellectually that bullying is not great or bad, I know it to be deadly. Words inspire actions and have real consequences for others. My sister's childhood meanness led to her self-inflicted death. And for myself and my family, it led to a lifetime of emotional trauma and pain. Almost the entirety of my sister's bullying happened at school. This bill directly addresses the need for supportive measures that are not disciplinary or punitive so that victims and witnesses can come forward without fear of retaliation. The children who were her bullies also were damaged and distraught by what had happened and needed guidance and navigating the devastation. If a bill like HB 4625 had existed for Rachel, maybe those who witnessed her bullying would have come forward before it was too late. Recently, my own children have experienced children Heil Hitlering in the school hallways and seen swastikas being drawn on fellow Jewish students' friends' notebooks. Their response was, "Well, Mom, no one knows we're Jewish, so we'll be okay." The school's response was that these were isolated incidents. But Rachel's death has taught me that exposure to identity-based bullying is not okay and is dangerous, and schools must do more to prevent these. This bill would increase tracking and documenting incidents of bullying in more detailed ways so that campuses, districts, even communities can not only count incidents, they can see trends and implement more targeted educational strategies to address specific drivers of bullying in the school and community. For example, if identity-based bullying is becoming more prevalent, doing more to build inclusiveness. Is that my timer?
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. It is our job as emotionally mature adults to help younger people understand that their words can actually hurt others. We cannot expect them to figure it out on their own, as they are not developmentally equipped to do so until much later. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Andrew Hairston with Texas Appleseed and yourself for the bill.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify again. Andrew Hairston with Texas Appleseed, here to testify for HB 4625. First, I want to commend the parents and young people who came from Lubbock and the Rio Grande Valley. I know that takes a particular set of courage to speak about very harmful incidents that occur in your schools. And as a racial justice organization, Texas Appleseed is particularly interested in hearing the stories of Black and brown children and families across the state, and we have been across our 27-year history. There are certain key components of the bill that I'd like to lift up, that it certainly emphasizes the importance of campus behavior coordinators in efforts to both heal from the pandemic and to address this legacy of the racial justice protest after George Floyd that began momentum to address the very pernicious history of racism in the United States and Texas, but saw an immediate backlash in critical race theory bans being passed, and now the present attacks on DEI initiatives. That very much so contextualizes what Black and brown young people are experiencing, and other folks, Jewish folks and folks of different national origins. It has a very detailed process, this bill, to have investigative reports of these horrific incidents that will be compiled by the school districts. Certainly, information will be redacted to maintain the privacy of the young people, and then have it publicly published on the school district's website at the end of the year. I think this will help both TEA and local school districts promulgate policies that will help to address this pressing issue head on. And finally, this bill addresses the need for a dialogue to create a culture of understanding and respect, and that is absolutely paramount. It's a very complicated history that we contend with as Americans. Certainly the Black and brown folks that you've heard from today on this bill can speak to that very, very passionately from their personal experiences. But to begin to address this very long history, this is again one step, as folks have offered up. And want to thank folks like Tiffany Harrison and the other folks who have testified. But again, it's one step in many to address this history and to make sure that racial justice is a true reality for the millions of folks across Texas and the United States. Happy to entertain any questions you have.
Any questions? Gary Bledsoe, Texas NAACP, and yourself, and you're for the bill.
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I too want to applaud all of the individuals who've come from around the state today to support this legislation. I think it's extremely important. I think that what I would like to do is to paint a perspective for why we need the bill. The written testimony there includes matters occurring in 6 different districts or 7 different districts around the state, showing that indeed it is a problem. Many of our units have been involved in the issues and problems. The first one cited is in the Woodsboro School District near Corpus Christi, where a courageous young branch president of ours went and stood in favor to support a young student, and it was such a serious threat against the young student that the students who actually threatened the student were indicted. But because of the actions of the young branch president in supporting the student, he ended up having to get police protection from the Corpus Christi PD and to get advice from the local FBI. They thought they were serious threats, and a number of incidents happened after that. I say that just to show you and put it in context that this is real. I want to point out that one of the incidents that I've got listed here relates to South Lake. I think if you look at South Lake, you can see the problem that has been kind of testified to today that many of the parents have encountered when they've raised these issues. In South Lake, you had widespread opposition to the use of the N-word and other kinds of pejoratives towards students. Many African American students were truly victimized in this situation. and in a really great showing of community. You had a number of affluent, conservative, white Republican parents that showed up and that opposed what was happening to these young students. But that district was never able to effectively address the abuse that those students were receiving. What occurred? The board members who were in office that had put together a task force to look into how they might address the issue were all turned out in an election. Administrators who wanted to do something were ultimately removed too. And so you can see the problem when you have conservative people who are reactionary that are in control of a district.
Your time is up. You can wrap it up.
Okay. I'm just saying you can see the difficult problem. So having a bill that requires an action makes good sense. And just one final thing, I think it's extremely well written bill because it's written to only the most extreme would not support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank y'all. We have TEA here as a resource if anyone has any questions for them. Yes. Hank Weichert. I hope I said that right. Did I get your last, how do you say your last name?
You did. It is Hank Weichert.
Weichert. Hank Weichert, TEA, neutral on the bill.
Yes.
Okay. Chair Lozano?
Yes, Hank. What was your position at TEA?
I am a Director of Student Supports Implementation in the Division of Supportive Schools.
Okay. Well, we've heard, about these instances at Lubbock Cooper, Slayton, Mission, Woodsboro, South Lake. I remember that there's a place for the public to submit complaints at TEA on matters like this. Is that still?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. What's the process at TEA on those kinds of complaints? Like they submit a letter or a...
It can be done online through email. So a complaint would come into TEA, to our complaints department. In cases of bullying and harassment, TEA takes those very seriously. Those are addressed immediately with the school district.
Okay. And then we heard earlier that some of the data collection, does TEA break down reports of bullying based on, if there's racial bullying, or is it just categorized as bullying, or do y'all collect that data?
I'm not familiar with how the reports are broken down.
Okay. I think that's it. I think the rest of the questions I would have would, I'm glad to know there's a process at TEA, but what are the teeth that TEA has? Like in this case, people in South Lake Carroll, a lot of these students have yet to get any kind of movement because there was a turnover of the school board, and then administrators, were let go that supported those students. In this case, what can TEA do? Is it all local control in TEA or?
So the legislature has already addressed bullying in 370832. Mm-hmm. So there are required procedures that districts have to adopt in order to address bullying, and there are required timelines that districts have to follow, and I believe it's School Board Policy FFI that they have to follow with that. If a school district is not following that and a parent is not satisfied with that, the response that they're getting from the campus, the district has an established grievance policy or a complaint policy that a parent would follow. They'd file a complaint with the campus, then with the school district, and then ultimately with the school board. If they are not satisfied with the with the results that they receive from that process, they can then file the complaint with TEA. Then TEA would get involved in that. They would listen to both sides, the parent's complaint and what the district has done, and then they give the district a timeline. My understanding of the process is the district is given an amount of time to satisfy that complaint with the parent, and then additional steps would be taken, and that I would have to defer to our complaints department.
So in the instance of students cropping images of a classmate onto someone that's being hung by a tree, someone that's being burned on a cross, being called monkeys, internet pages and memes of students being called monkeys, and their images are put on that website, and the school board does not expel these students, and the victim student has to be re-victimized by seeing that person still in school, still in class. They go through that grievance process. They file a complaint with TEA. What can TEA do about it?
And again, I would have to defer to our complaints department. I don't have that answer. That's something that we can get back to you
That's what I was thinking. I would have to get with them. Okay.
And I had a question on some of that. Do you have any more?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Let the record reflect Representative Ann Johnson is now present. On some of that, it was obviously the bullying was done by other children, but in some of the other things that we heard were awful behavior and things said by assistant principals and things like that. So I guess, is it the same sort of complaint process, whether it's a child or someone at the school, or someone who works there?
They would file the complaint, but the complaint process against a staff member would be different because it would be an employment action as opposed to following the bullying procedure.
Okay. And then is there anything, he mentioned the social media, obviously the examples that we were shown are horrific, and there's that aspect of it. There's also the other aspect of parents not consenting to their minor children's pictures being on social media. So is there anything with that? I know you kind of mentioned that. That's a whole other thing you'd have to get back on. Is that the same sort of thing? Is there anything that parents can do? Because if the school's not addressing that and the school board's not addressing these parents, requesting that this account be handled, somehow the school handle it, these pictures be taken down. Is there anything that y'all can do there?
I would have to look into that. I'm not familiar with TEA's ability to have schools take pictures down off social media.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there was any sort of process there. Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? No? Do you have one? Representative Allison?
Let me ask you this, and you may be the wrong person to ask, so you can tell me if I am. We're talking about bullying.
Yes.
Right? Which is a very broad concept, for lack of a better description, right? Covers a number of things. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. And in the statute, it is defined as to what we're talking about when we talk about bullying in regards to the bullying policies that districts have.
And the statute's definition is very broad, and
yes,
I think
it is
intentionally broad, because I think this is such a fluid situation. We have situations, we're talking a lot now about identity bullying, and that troubles me somewhat because it's much broader than that. We have situations where it's white on white, black on black, brown on brown, any combination of that, girl on girl, girl on boy, boy on boy, for any number of things, whether you're good in athletics or you're not, whether you're musically inclined or not, whether you're a good student or not. Kids and people are mean, correct?
In many cases, yes.
And I just, like I said, that troubles me. I don't want to get away from that. And if we get too specific or focused, we miss the big picture and what we're trying to accomplish. And that's why I think the current definition we have is what we need. Maybe it needs to be tweaked a little bit, but that breadth, I think, is so important because it's such a broad area. And I fully agree. I think the more we can hone down on where we've got the problems with the administration, with parents, with reporting to the school board or with TEA, I think we need to explore that. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Tall. Thank you, representatives.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4625? Not. Testimony on House Bill 4625 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Reynolds to close on his bill.
Thank you, members. I want to thank Chairwoman Thompson for laying out the bill in my absence, and I want to thank the members, Vice Chair Hull, and all the members for your patience. I know there were a lot of witnesses testifying today. One of the things that we know for sure as legislators, that you can't legislate morality. We can't do that. But what we can do is put policies in place to make sure that there are checks and balances so that these students, and I commend them for their courageousness from leaving school. This is an unexcused absence. They're here today because they won't change. These parents that travel thousands of miles to be here, ladies and gentlemen, there is a problem. The problem lies in that we have some things on the books, but we don't have enough. We don't have enough specifics to address and identify. And this bill isn't going to solve every situation, but it's a step in the right direction to make sure that we have some policies in place to put some teeth behind some measures that can address specific identity-based bullying. And this is a problem. We can't sweep it under the rug. Literally, students are committing suicide. And as a parent, my heart broke. We can't continue to do nothing. I experienced a child in my district that experienced the same thing. So I'm asking for this body to give this bill full consideration. If the bill needs to be better, we'll make it better. But we can't do nothing. And I'll close.
Members, do you have any questions? Thank you. Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 4625 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The bill will be left pending.